welcome to Office Hours. I am Greg Yachtman from Celona. With me, as always, is Mehmet Yavuz, our co-founder and CTO. Today, we're going to be talking about PAL licenses. Now, with the auction 105 being over and PAL licenses being a hot topic because $4.5 million is no joke, I'm reminded of Eddie Van Halen, who passed today, and everybody wants some. So it sounds like they do with that much money being thrown around, but is there enough left for the rest of us? Mehmet, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes, a lot of spectrum available for enterprises, and I'll explain why, right? So we talked about this three-tier system in the CBRS band. Tier 1, incumbents, military radars, fixed satellite stations, really in very small pockets of regions and using a small chunk of this total 150 megahertz. Now, the remaining users are the Tier 2, priority access license users. They can license up to 70 megahertz of the spectrum. And then the third tier GAA, which has been commercial, is at least 80 megahertz guaranteed and can use any additional spectrum which is not used by PAL. So the PAL auction has been concluded about a month ago, and there were multiple institute companies who entered into the auction. Instead of a nationwide licensing, the PAL spectrum was auctioned at a county basis. So in 3,230 or so counties, there were separate auctions, and each entity going into auction can get 10, 20, 30, or 40 megahertz of spectrum. And we've seen Verizon, Dish Networks, Charter, Comcast, Cox getting a bulk of spectrum, but it's very unevenly distributed. For example, Verizon got spectrum only in 5% of the counties, although they spent the most amount of money because they went for those top tier, high density markets that they need spectrum. And interestingly, there's energy companies, utility companies, and some higher ed institutes, universities or so, who got some spectrum as well. So it was a mixed bag of different entities getting some PAL spectrum, and we have a lot of data that we have analyzed.
So with all this buying taking place and the auction now being closed, what does this mean for the rest of the enterprise?
Yeah, great question. Again, the third tier GAA, General Authorized Access, is always guaranteed 80 megahertz, right? Now, our analysis shows that in many places there will be additional spectrum available, not used by the incumbents or the PAL. What we are seeing is really 100 to 120 megahertz of spectrum will be available for GAA. And this is again because even an entity, if they got the spectrum for a county, they didn't get the whole 70, they got a small part of the 70, and then they may not deploy in the whole county, right? They may deploy in different pockets, in different parts of the county. And so when we do all that analysis, we are kind of coming to the conclusion that around 100 to 120 megahertz is going to be available. And honestly, this is a great validation of this CBRS model. Now, finally, the PAL auction is also concluded. So we have all the three tiers in place. And given the operators are getting in to this band, it also will drive a rich ecosystem of devices, and that will be great for everyone using this band.
All right, perfect. So with all this happening, it sounds pretty exciting. Is there any chance that this will happen in other bands?
Yeah, I mean, in US, interestingly, Department of Defense issued an RFI very recently because they have spectrum from 3.1 to 3.55 gigahertz. This is like 450 megahertz of spectrum right below the CBRS. And they're asking for input in terms of how to best utilize this spectrum. Of course, they have their own use, but then their use is kind of in limited regions. So the model, which is being validated with CBRS or some variant of it, can be very applicable to at least some parts of that 450 megahertz spectrum, which is a premium 5G spectrum. And equivalently, we see globally in many places in Europe and Asia, spectrum opening up for enterprises for private LTE and 5G use cases. So it's really an exciting time to be in this right now. And lastly, I want to say We have a lot of data that we analyze, and I have data for each county, who applied, who got what. So if someone is interested in further details in their specific region, we'd love to continue the conversation. Please reach out to us. We'd love to share our analysis with all the PAL auction data and how it applies to your CBRS plans.
Thank you, Mehmet. I really appreciate that. I'm sure that our listeners and our viewers do as well. So CBRS, sounds like if you want some, there's still plenty for you. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're happy to hear from you. Feel free to drop back in as well. We love to have you here at office hours. So again, thank you. If you have any other questions around CBRS, PAL licenses, or around Mehmet himself, I'm sure he'd be glad to answer. Until then, have a great day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.